If you are struggling to fall asleep or stay asleep, if you have any form of insomnia, then I've got some evidence-based methods for you that I think are going to help you get good night's sleep, a sleep that you probably deserve. Um, we're going to look at something called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. I know that's a lot of jargon, but it's basically just an incredibly useful therapy that is super practical, and you don't actually need a therapist for 80% of it. It's something I use with clients when they're struggling to get sleep or their sleep patterns have been disrupted. But I don't think you need me for this. So I'm just going to talk you through what the therapy entails and how you can apply it for yourself in your own life. So let's jump into it. All the information I'm getting is pretty much from chapter 3 and 4 of this really useful book called Overcoming Insomnia. And this is written by experts in the field. This book, I mean, part of the series is called Treatments That Work. So, yeah, I don't think you get more evidence based than that. Okay. Now, while this book has been written for therapists, I'm going to break it down a bit so that you guys can get the information that's useful if you are not seeing a therapist. Okay. So basically, if I had to summarize these 3 chapters, there are 3 ways to get better sleep, and we're going to go into detail with each of them. The first is simple behavioral changes. So those are things you can start implementing tonight. 2 is a bit more generally about sleep hygiene. Hygiene just means health, so sleep health. And the second bit, sleep hygiene, is a bit more not related directly to changing something about the way you sleep, but it's all these external factors that have an influence. So you're going to want to change those as well in the long term. And then number 3 is combating unhelpful thoughts, because we know that even if you have everything set up for a good night's sleep, you can still struggle to fall asleep if you are struggling with anxiety or if your mind is racing at night. You know, when your head hits the pillow, sometimes that's when all the thoughts come out and keep you awake. So let us jump into the details. So this first category, simple behavioral changes, I've just broken it down into a few practical tips that you can use. The first is to select a standard rising time. Okay, this is very important because our biology works in rhythms, just like a lot of nature. You know, we as humans, we also have certain rhythms. And so because we've evolved on this planet for a long time, we work with the cycle of day and night. And so in order to get your body back into a rhythm that's working for you and a solid pattern, the foundation of that is to keep rising at the same time. So I want you to pause this video, go into your phone right now and set an alarm and choose a time that's realistic for you, that will work for you. It doesn't matter too much if it's very early or very late, but I would say make sure you stick to this alarm time for at least 2 weeks, and then see how you're feeling after that. Okay, even if you don't get enough sleep on the night before, let's say your alarm time is 7 a.m. and you went to bed at 2 a.m., I would still recommend getting up at this time just so that it's easier to fall asleep the next night. So even though you're probably going to struggle on that day, it will allow you to get to bed a bit more effectively later on. Okay, so that's the first tip. The second is to use the bed only for sleeping. Okay, so this is really important because the way our mind works is it associates certain objects in our room with certain mental states. If you are used to doing other things in your bed, like working in your bed, studying, reading lots of stimulating books, then your mind is going to associate the bed with being alert and awake and with working. So when you try to go to bed later at night after having studied in bed all day, your mind is still going to be in working mode. So ideally, you shouldn't even read in bed. You can read something that's not too intellectually or emotionally stimulating, but other than that, no reading in bed. It's better if you're going to do anything in bed, make sure it's relaxing. Okay. So I think an action tip here is to just list all the things that you do in bed. And really think about it any time of the day, even if it's during the day, even if it's not at night when you get into bed to sleep, even if it's during the day and you're lying on your bed scrolling through social media or something like that, just make a list of all of these things so that you know what you're in contention with. Okay. The next tip is to get out of bed when you can't sleep. This is a bit of a sucky tip because it means that if you are in bed and it's a winter's night and you're cold and your bed's all cozy, but your mind for some reason is keeping you awake, it means you're going to have to get out of bed. You're going to have to leave the coziness and you're going to have to ideally find another room. If you can't find another room, if you live in a bachelor flat or something like that, then at least getting out of the bed and maybe sitting on a chair or something like that. Okay. Again, this comes back to that association process that we were talking about. If you stay in bed while struggling to fall asleep, your mind in that moment is probably feeling a bit stressed, a bit agitated, and you are starting to associate the bed with agitation and stress. So whenever you're feeling that and you're struggling to fall asleep, it's best to get out of bed. And the tough part about this is it doesn't matter if you're struggling to fall asleep when you go to bed initially, or if you wake up at 2 a.m. and you struggle to fall asleep. Again, if you wake up at 2 a.m. and you're struggling to fall asleep, you have to get out of bed even then until you start to feel sleepy again in your lounge or wherever you are. That's the only time you can come back to bed. Okay. So that is tip 3. Tip 4 is don't worry, plan, or problem solve in bed. Okay. So tell me if you can relate to this, right? You've been busy with your day. You've woken up, you've gone to work, you've cooked, you've eaten, you've watched TV. You've had all these distractions throughout the day. Your mind's been occupied. And finally, when you get to bed, that's when you start to think about your life. The existential crisis arises. You think about all the things you have to do tomorrow or next week or next month. That's sort of when you start to get bombarded by all these thoughts. So again, we're looking at that association process. Don't associate the bed with that problem solving, that worry, and that planning, whatever it is. Don't associate it with those things. Instead, get out of bed. And if you can't get out of bed, I'm also going to have some tips in the last section on how to deal with worry and anxiety when it arises in bed. So I've got you covered there. Tip 5 is to avoid daytime napping. This is not so much related to the association process, but this is related more to that first tip about our bodies being rhythmic. And if you are training your body to develop a solid wakefulness and sleep rhythm, then putting in little naps, little bursts of sleep throughout the day is not allowing your body to recognize that rhythm, that from this hour to this hour, we are usually awake. From this hour to this hour, I should be asleep. Okay, so avoid daytime napping because that's just going to confuse your body. It's not going to get used to the fact that you need to be awake during the day and you need to be asleep at night. Also, if you nap during the day, you are going to struggle to fall asleep at night. So you don't want that. I mean, that's part of the problem. So rather, push through the day, even if you're tired, even if you feel like a nap, just push through it and fall asleep at night if possible. Okay. And then the final tip for this section is to avoid excessive time in bed. I think this one is pretty much self-explanatory, but, don't get in bed too early when you're not sleepy. Don't get into bed to scroll through social media or to, I don't know, start looking at ideas for your home or on your laptop. Just don't do it. Just don't. Okay. So we're going to get to the next section now, which is the sleep hygiene that I was talking about. So all of the tips we covered so far, you can implement today already, and those are directly related to your sleep behavior. Sleep hygiene is about all the things that surround sleep that either contribute to you falling asleep and getting a good night's rest or not. So let's look at those. The first is to limit caffeine. Okay. If you don't drink any forms of caffeine, that's great. If you do, push it to the morning hours. Try not to have it in the afternoon because caffeine actually stays in your bloodstream a lot longer than you might think. Okay. So a bit of an action tip if you want to do something right now and get this implemented is go put all your caffeinated drinks on a high shelf or give them away to someone. Or drink green tea if you're craving caffeine, because green tea has another substance in the tea that counteracts the effects of the caffeine, so it doesn't actually keep you awake at night. Okay, so, but look, you don't have to throw away your coffee. Just if you are going to drink it, try and drink it in the morning. Number 2 is to limit alcohol. Yeah, I'm hell-bent on just eliminating all your pleasures in life. So, but alcohol, even though alcohol is a sedative, even though alcohol actually can help you fall asleep quicker, and I'm sure maybe you've experienced that, or maybe you know someone else who, once they drink a bit of alcohol, they feel a bit sleepy. Even though that's the case, and it helps you fall asleep, it doesn't get you a depth of sleep. Because what we're going for is to get you able to fall asleep quickly and also to get you to have deep sleep, sleep that's not interrupted very readily by a small sound, for example. And it's important to get deep sleep because if you're getting deep sleep, it basically means you're moving through all the stages of sleep. Sleep has many stages, and you go deeper into different levels. I won't get too technical with that, but just know that deep sleep is important, and alcohol interrupts that. Alcohol interrupts specifically the stages of sleep that are deeper. So avoid alcohol if you can. Number 3 is to exercise regularly, but not close to bedtime. Okay, so exercise, just like alcohol, there's a bit of a caveat there. Exercise can help you get better sleep and better quality sleep as well, but not if you do it close to bedtime, because exercise causes a spike in your physiological arousal. And if you are aroused before going to bed, you're doing the opposite of what you need to do. You need to be relaxed when going to bed, but exercise wakes you up. So exercise is an interesting one. Try and do it in the mornings if you can, and exercise regularly, and it will bolster your sleep. It will help you sleep better. If you do it too close to bedtime, it's going to increase your core body temperature. And then when your core body temperature is increased, again, you're doing the opposite of what you need to do when you fall asleep, because you are supposed to be cooling down when you fall asleep. Your body does that to conserve energy. So you don't want to do anything that's going to get you heated up. Okay. Number 4 is to try a light bedtime snack, such as peanut butter. Peanut butter will actually help you become a bit sleepy at night. Teas can also be helpful. Just don't drink too much before you go to bed, because you'll be awoken by the urge to pee. So avoid that. Look, peanut butter is not the only thing you can eat here. You're welcome to Google foods that are helpful. So an action step is maybe to, after this video, or even right now, if you want to pause, you can just Google some foods that are helpful. Check if you have them in the cupboards. If you don't, go to the grocery store and maybe keep them in the same section in the cupboard. So that you know this is your bedtime cupboard and you have a bit of a snack before bedtime. Next, you have to keep your bedroom quiet and dark. Look, quiet is self-explanatory. You don't want to be alerted at night, but the dark element as well is important, because when there's light coming in through the eyes, even if your eyes are closed, the light can still enter through the eyelids. So if your body is detecting those light signals, it's actually interfering with your internal processes, and it's sending signals for your body to wake up because you think it's daytime. So keep your bedroom quiet and dark. And then finally, keep your bedroom cool. And again, this is related to the exercise. Remember, exercise heats you up. You actually want to cool down before bed, because that's what naturally happens when as you're falling asleep. Your core body temperature cools down. And that's not me saying this. That's according to the Harvard Medical School. You can go look at the links I'll provide. But your body cools down. So experiment with the temperature that works for you, because you don't want it to be too cold. You might get sick, or you might struggle to fall asleep because you're shivering. But just experiment with it. If you're lucky enough to have an aircon, you can set the temperature between 15 and 20 degrees Celsius. I'm not sure what that is in Fahrenheit, but you can look that up for yourself. Okay. So then the last section we're going to speak about here is combating unhelpful thoughts. So once you've made the simple behavioral changes to your sleep patterns, once you've covered all the sleep hygiene factors, you then want to make sure that your mind is not keeping you up through a lot of unhelpful thoughts, stress, anxiety, etc. Okay. So I think one thing to realize here is that there are ways to not feel anxious when going to bed. There are ways to relax yourself, and there are ways to deal with these thoughts. We can change the patterns of our mind as we go to bed, even though it seems like I'll always worry when I go to bed because that's what's always happened. That's not necessarily the case. You can change that. You just need to break these habits that your mind has formed. So one suggestion to do that is to engage in something called constructive worry. If you didn't know this, worry can actually be constructive. And if you think about it, it's because worry is often future oriented. You're worrying about something in the future. And to worry about something that's going to happen in the future and to anticipate that can actually be adaptive. It can be good for you. That's the basis of planning. That's the basis of problem solving. So worry can be constructive. You just have to be quite intentional about it, because usually worry becomes cyclical. We just think, oh, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to do this? What if this happens? What if that happens? So it's almost ellipses, questions without answers. But you can actually take that energy, that energy within you that's concerned about your future, and you can direct it into an intentional problem solving and constructive process. So the next time you start worrying about things at night, I want you to think about it in this way. Worry has your back. It's actually just problem solving, and it's trying to protect your future. So how do you do that? Get out a page. You write your concerns that you might have at bedtime. And you do this before going to bed, right? So you can do it now as well. You can get out a page, draw a line down the center, write concerns on the left column and solutions on the right. And then you're going to write all the things that you usually worry about. Try not to guess what you would worry about. See if you can just go back in time and spot the things that usually come up. The things that come up most frequently are, you want to particularly focus on those. So write down a concern, and then write down possible solutions. So if a concern is something like, I don't know how I'm going to pay the bills this month, write that down on the left column, and then write down some solutions like, I could speak to a financial advisor at my bank, or I could contact my friend about that part-time job opportunity that they had. So you see, you are creating dead ends for the worry. So when these concerns come up at night, you can keep this page on your bedside table, folded if you want to keep it out of mind, or maybe in your bedroom. And then if you worry, you can get this piece of paper out and look at the concern, but also look at the solution. That way it's not just unhinged worry. It's worry with a solution balancing it out, which can help you relax and say, okay, no, it's fine. I've got this worry covered. I'll look at it in the morning, or I've got a plan for it. So I can put this for rest for now, and then I can rest as well. Okay. And then the second tip related to this is to look at your common insomnia thoughts. So we all make these sort of mistakes in reasoning. So if you start to worry about something, that you can actually notice if any of these thought patterns are present, and then just label it as illogical or irrational. Because sometimes, we engage in something like misattribution. For example, misattribution is attributing the cause to an incorrect event. So, for example, if someone gives you a funny look, you know, you might assume that's because you don't look good on that day. But, the actual cause of their funny look could be maybe they smelled something weird, or maybe they were looking at something else behind you, or there's all sorts of things. So notice if you're engaging in misattribution. Emotional reasoning is another one. If you're feeling anxious or afraid, or if you're feeling sad, your thoughts will think in the flavor of that emotion. So if you are feeling an emotion, maybe you've gone through something difficult recently, for example, and things feel hopeless, just acknowledge that whatever thoughts are coming up at night are probably the result of that emotional tone rather than the absolute truth. That's emotional reasoning, but you've got all sorts of other um, uh, errors in cognition here that you can look up and you can Google for yourself. And then finally, I'd just like to end with this quote, which is: sleep is essential for the body and mind, and restful sleep is one of the foundations of good health. Recharging and rejuvenating body and mind sufficiently every night is important for better quality of life. I really like that because it reminds us that, you don't just correct your sleep just for the sake of sleep. You correct it because it's going to make your life better. And with that, I hope you go get some rest.